The transmission originated from a world already dying. High above the planet Prime, Ambassador Tellerin Voss stood alone inside the towering communications spire, its ancient machinery humming weakly beneath his feet. The soft blue glow of the console reflected off his skin, which had lost its luster after days without rest. His long fingers hovered over the activation panel, trembling, not from age but from despair. He had sent this message more times than he could remember. "This is Ambassador Tellerin of Prime," he said quietly, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Our world is under assault. A consuming swarm has breached our defenses. Entire cities have fallen. The skies burn. Our people are hiding underground." He paused, feeling the weight of billions of terrified minds pressing against his own through the shared psychic bond of the species. "If anyone receives this signal, anyone at all, we beg you, please help us." The message was released, racing across space, leaping through relays and ancient networks, touching star systems beyond counting. It reached empires, federations, and worlds of unimaginable power. Most of them ignored it. Some labeled the situation untenable. Others calculated the risk and closed their borders. A few never even opened the transmission. Prime was marked for extinction. The enemy was known simply as the Devourers, a collective organism made of millions of creatures acting as one. They moved from world to world, stripping planets down to bare stone. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. Hunger was their only law. From the observation windows, Tellerin watched as massive organic war vessels descended to the atmosphere like falling nightmares. They ruptured open midair, releasing waves of smaller horrors that poured into the streets below. Towers collapsed. Fires spread unchecked. The psychic screams of his people echoed inside his mind until it felt like his thoughts might fracture. Deep beneath the capital, the ruling council gathered in a reinforced sanctuary carved into bedrock. 12 elders sat in a ring, their expressions hollow. "The Galactic Assembly has rejected our plea," one elder said. "They believe intervention would only spread the infestation. The Imperium has sealed its space lanes," another added bitterly. "They fear being followed." A third elder lowered her gaze. "Then Prime will fall alone." Silence followed. Tellerin closed his eyes, feeling grief, terror, and resignation flowing to the bond that connected every citizen. It was crushing. Then something changed. A sharp tone cut through the chamber. A young communications officer rushed forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "Ambassador," he said, breathless. We receive a reply. Tellerin stood instantly. "From whom?" The officer hesitated. "It's not a fleet. It's a single ship, a civilian cargo vessel." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "The vessel is registered to a species called humans," the officer continued. "They're altering course to assist." Disbelief turned to dread. "Humans?" an elder whispered. Why would they answer? The galactic archives were summoned at once. What appeared on the display drained the color from every face in the room. Earth classification, hazard level 7. The highest possible threat designation. Images flooded the screen. Violent storms that swallowed cities, predators with claws and fangs, oceans filled with killing machines, endless wars etched into human history. Disease, famine, mass extinction, yet somehow humans had survived it all. "They are savage," one elder breathed. "They destroyed each other for centuries. They consume other creatures," another said, recoiling. "They hunt for sport." Tellerin stared at the images longer than the others. He saw chaos, but also resilience. A species forged under relentless pressure. "What have we done?" the youngest council whispered. "We asked for help and summoned monsters." Tellerin said nothing. He could not be sure they were wrong. 3 days later, the human ship arrived. It was called the Wayward Sun, and it was nothing like the warships Prime had hoped for. Its hull was scarred, its plating mismatched, its engines loud and imperfect. It looked tired, like it had been flying too long without rest. On its bridge, Captain Jonah Mercer gazed down at Prime's burning surface. Fires raged across continents. Millions were dying while the galaxy watched from a safe distance. "That's not just an infestation," the pilot muttered. "That's an extinction." Mercer nodded grimly. Then we don't have time to waste. The wayward sun began its descent. Deep underground, Ambassador Tellerin felt the psychic mood of his people shift. Not to hope, but to terror. The humans had arrived. No one on Prime yet knew that this battered civilian ship carried the only chance their world had left. The wayward sun settled onto the scorched plain with a hiss of steam and dust. Its landing strut sank slightly into the ashen ground, stabilizing against tremors from distant bombardments. Smoke drifted across the field, carrying the bitter scent of burned metal and organic decay. 5 figures emerged from the ship. They wore protective suits marked by wear and repair, not military insignia. Their weapons, if they could even be called that, were clearly modified tools. Mining cutters repurposed into plasma emitters, scanners reinforced with targeting modules. They looked unremarkable by galactic standards. And yet, they radiated danger. Ambassador Tellerin observed them from a concealed platform near the bunker entrance. His mind instinctively reached out, brushing against theirs through the psychic sense his species shared. The contact nearly staggered him. Human minds were loud, not chaotic, but intense. Where most species contain emotion behind discipline and training, humans burned openly. Their thoughts surged with focus, urgency, and something that felt like restrained fury. But it was not bloodlust. It was outrage. They were angry that people were suffering, angry that no one else had come, angry at the unfairness of extinction delivered to strangers who had done nothing to deserve it. Beneath that anger was something deeper, protectiveness. And beneath that, something Tellerin had not felt in centuries, a fierce love for life itself. These are not predators, Tellerin whispered to himself. These are guardians. He stepped from cover. The humans noticed him instantly. Weapons rose. But one of them, the tall man at the center, raised a hand, halting the others. The alien ambassador stood barely chest-high to the human captain. His skin glowed faintly blue beneath the smoke-darkened sky. His eyes, large and liquid, studied them with equal parts fear and wonder. "I am Ambassador Tellerin of Prime," he said softly. "You answered our call." The human nodded. "Captain Jonah Mercer. This is my crew. We came as fast as we could." Tellerin hesitated before speaking again. "Our records classify your homeworld as extremely dangerous." One of the humans, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, stepped forward. "That's accurate," she said gently. "Earth isn't kind, but that's why we're still standing." She activated a small display, projecting images into the air. Massive predators, violent storms, endless oceans filled with teeth and shadows. "We grew up here," she continued. "Survival wasn't optional. We learned to adapt or die." Tellerin absorbed the images, his fear shifting into understanding. Nearby, survivors gathered cautiously. They were thin, exhausted, their skin dull with trauma. Children clutched at adults, eyes wide as they stared at the towering humans. One of the crew, a younger man with tired eyes, noticed a child standing alone. Without speaking, he knelt, slowly removing a ration bar from his pack. He extended it carefully, keeping his movements gentle. The child hesitated. Everything about the human screamed danger, strength, size, power. But his smile was warm, his eyes kind. Slowly, the child reached out and took the food. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Some wept openly. Tellerin felt something break inside him, in the best possible way. The moment shattered as alarms screamed from the bunker sensors. Movement east. One of the humans reported. Scout units. "How many?" Mercer asked. 30, maybe more." Mercer didn't hesitate. "Get your people inside. We'll handle this." "You cannot," Tellerin protested. "There are only 5 of you." Mercer met his gaze steadily. "That's enough." The swarm scouts emerged moments later. Sleek, armored creatures moving with terrifying speed. They attacked without warning, mandibles snapping, claws tearing into the ground. The humans did not flee. They moved as one. Shots struck precisely where armor was weakest. Modified tools tore through chitin-like paper. The humans covered one another instinctively, retreating and advancing in perfect coordination. The fight lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 30 swarm creatures lay lifeless in the dirt. Not one human had fallen. Tellerin stared, stunned. "What are you?" Mercer wiped grime from his face. "Human, and we're not leaving." Far beneath the planet's surface, the Devourer Queen registered the loss of her scouts. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, her calculations encountered uncertainty. Something on this world was fighting back, and it was not afraid. The swarm did not retreat after its scouts were destroyed. It adapted. Within hours, larger assault waves began probing the human position. They came in relentless bursts, dozens at a time, testing the bunker's perimeter, seeking weaknesses. Each attack was more coordinated than the last. Captain Jonah Mercer stood atop a hastily reinforced barricade, weapon glowing hot from continuous use. His muscles burned. His lungs ached. Sleep had become a distant memory. Yet he remained upright, eyes locked on the shifting mass of creatures beyond the smoke. Beside him, his crew fought with the same stubborn refusal to yield. They were not invincible. They were bruised, exhausted, and bleeding. But every time one faltered, another stepped in without hesitation. Ambassador Tellerin watched from within the bunker, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. Most species fought in rotations. Warriors rested, recovered, and returned when ready. Humans did not. They endured. When one collapsed, another carried them. When their hands shook, they tightened their grip. They pushed through exhaustion as though it were merely another obstacle to overcome. "How do they continue?" a young council aide whispered. Tellerin answered slowly. "On their world, stopping means death. They learned long ago that endurance is not a choice, it is survival." Inside the bunker, one of the humans, the woman called Dr. Maricole, had transformed the storage chamber into a medical station. Between attacks, she treated wounded civilians with calm efficiency, showing local healers techniques that required little equipment but saved lives. "Our medicine advanced quickly," she explained to her students. "We had too many ways to die not to," one of the trainees asked hesitantly. "If your world is so brutal, why help others instead of protecting only yourselves?" Mara paused, then smiled softly. "Because surviving isn't enough. Humans need meaning. We need to know our suffering counts for something." Meanwhile, the ship's engineer, Elias Trent, worked tirelessly in the Wayward Sun's cargo bay. Mining equipment became weapons. Scanners became targeting systems. Explosives were assembled from industrial charges meant for asteroid drilling. Working beside him, Rhea Lawson, the crew's logistics officer, loaded ammunition with steady hands. "You ever imagined this when you signed up?" she asked dryly. Elias laughed, despite his exhaustion. "Not even close." "And yet," she said, snapping another charge into place, "here we are." Above them, the swarm escalated again. Dozens became hundreds. The Queen had identified the humans as a threat, and she responded with overwhelming force. It was during one of these assaults that the evacuation order came. 300 children were trapped in outlying shelters far from the bunker. The swarm was closing in fast. "They won't survive another day," Tellerin said quietly. The human pilot, Lucas Hale, stepped forward immediately. "I'll take the shuttle." Mercer frowned. "Alone?" Lucas nodded. "Less risk." The route was suicide, straight through infested airspace. But no one argued. The shuttle launched under fire. Swarm flyers surged toward it, slamming into the hull, tearing at engines. Alarms screamed as systems failed. Lucas pushed the craft beyond its limits, weaving through clouds of living weapons. "Come on," he muttered to the shuttle. "Just hold together." Behind him, the children huddled in silence, too frightened even to cry. They watched the human pilot fight the sky itself to save them. One engine failed. The shuttle spun violently. Lucas wrestled the controls back into alignment, sweat dripping into his eyes. He thought of his own childhood, staring up at ships from an orbital station, dreaming of flight. He had wanted to see the universe. He hadn't known it would look like this. The mountain sanctuary appeared through the smoke. The shuttle slammed down hard, but intact. The children were safe. Back at the bunker, Mercer allowed himself a single breath of relief before returning to fight. That was when Rhea uncovered something critical. The swarm was not acting independently. All movement, all coordination, flowed through a central neural node buried beneath the primary hive cluster. Destroy it, and the swarm would collapse into chaos. "It's deep," Rhea reported. "Half a mile of hive mass." Mercer met his crew's eyes. "Then that's where we go." The decision was unanimous. Even Tellerin insisted on sending guides. "This is our world," he said. "We will not hide while you bleed for us." The humans nodded. They would face the heart of the swarm together. Far below, the Devourer Queen felt the humans drawing closer. Her calculations shifted again. For the first time, she prepared not to hunt, but to defend. The tunnels beneath the hive were alive. Walls pulsed faintly, slick with organic matter that throbbed like muscle beneath skin. The air was thick with toxic spores that burned the lungs and blurred vision. Every sound echoed, clicks, skitters, distant screeches, each one a promise of death waiting just out of sight. Captain Jonah Mercer led the descent. Behind him moved Dr. Maricole, Elias Trent, Rhea Lawson, and 2 prime scouts, Island and Cora, their faces pale but resolute. The young aliens had volunteered despite knowing the odds. Fear trembled in their movements, but they did not turn back. Above ground, Lucas Hale coordinated aerial scans, his voice crackling through the comms. "You're nearing the central chamber. Heat signatures are dense. Hundreds between you and the node." Mercer's reply was steady. "Understood." The first wave struck without warning. Creatures poured from a side passage, armor gleaming wetly under the bioluminescent light. Mercer and Rhea took the front, weapons cutting arcs of fire through the swarm. The confined tunnels forced the attackers into narrow paths, an advantage the humans exploited ruthlessly. Mara covered the rear with precise shots, but her attention split when one creature broke through toward Cora. It moved too fast. Mara lunged. The creature's claw tore through her suit and into her shoulder. Pain exploded white-hot, but she didn't stop. She jammed her weapon under the creature's jaw and fired. It dropped instantly. Mara staggered, blood soaking her sleeve. "You're hurt," Cora whispered, shaken. Mara forced a smile through clenched teeth. "I've had worse." They pressed on. Mercer took her weight when she faltered, hauling her forward with one arm while firing with the other. Leaving her behind was never considered. Not once. The central chamber opened suddenly before them. It was vast, cathedral-sized, and horrifying. At its center rose a neural node, a massive organic structure glowing with sickly light, tendrils of living tissue anchoring it to the chamber walls. Every pulse sent ripples through the hive, and surrounding it waited the swarm. Hundreds of warriors. Elias scanned the layout rapidly. "If I reach that platform, I can plant the charges directly on the node. 3 minutes. Mercer nodded. "Then we give you 3 minutes." As Elias sprinted for platform, the swarm surged. Mercer and Rhea charged forward, drawing the enemy's attention. Their movements were brutal and efficient, no wasted effort, no hesitation. Island, to his own surprise, fought beside them, fear giving way to raw determination. Through a seized drone, the Queen spoke. Her voice echoed inside their minds. "Why do you resist?" she demanded. "This world is not yours. You gain nothing." Mercer paused only long enough to answer. "Someone asked for help." "That is illogical." "Maybe," Mercer said, firing again, "but it's human." Elias reached the node and began setting the charges, hands steady despite the chaos around him. Then the hive reacted. The chamber shook violently. Organic structures collapsed inward as the Queen redirected every remaining defender toward the humans. Mara collapsed to one knee, blood loss finally slowing her. Mercer caught her just in time. "I'm not done," she whispered fiercely. "I know," Mercer replied. Charges placed. Elias shouted, "We need to move." The retreat was worse than the advance. Creatures flooded the tunnels from every direction. Rhea fired until her weapon overheated. Mercer cleared a path, dragging Mara with him while shielding the scouts. Then the ceiling gave way. The collapse was instantaneous. Elias vanished beneath tons of living stone. Elias! Rhea screamed, clawing at the rubble. Mercer dropped to his knees, tearing at debris with bare hands. But there was too much, and the swarm was still coming. "Jonah," Mara said weakly, "the charge is—" Mercer froze. He knew. Elias had known. Rhea's voice broke. He'd want us to finish it. The countdown chimed in their ears. 60 seconds. Mercer closed his eyes once, then stood. "Move," he ordered. They ran. Mara was carried. Cora limped beside them, injured but determined. Rhea covered the rear until her ammunition ran dry. 10 seconds. They burst into open air. Mercer threw himself over the others as the explosion tore through the hive. Fire and shock waves erupted skyward. The ground shook violently, then went still. Behind them, the hive collapsed on itself. Across the planet, the swarm faltered, disconnected, broken. The war was over. But victory came at a cost none of them would ever forget. Silence followed the explosion. Not the uneasy silence of fear, but something deeper, final. The hive entrance behind them collapsed inward, its living structures tearing themselves apart without direction or command. Across the planet, swarm creatures staggered, colliding with one another, their coordinated purpose gone. The Devourer Queen was dead. Captain Jonah Mercer rose slowly, his body trembling with exhaustion. He turned back toward the ruined hive, knowing exactly where Elias Trent lay buried beneath the wreckage. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he saved them all. Mara Cole squeezed his hand, her face pale, her arm bound in makeshift bandages. No words could ease the loss. They didn't try. As dawn crept across prime sky, something extraordinary happened. The fires began to fade. Smoke thinned. For the first time in days, sunlight touched the surface without being filtered through ash and destruction. The planet's survivors emerged cautiously from bunkers and shelters, blinking in disbelief. Children ran freely across open ground. Parents held one another and cried. Entire families simply stood in the light, afraid that if they moved too quickly, the miracle might disappear. Ambassador Tellerin watched it all from a nearby ridge. For the first time since the invasion began, the crushing psychic weight that had haunted his mind was gone. Fear no longer dominated the shared consciousness of his people. Hope, fragile but real, had taken its place. Later that day, the council gathered not in secrecy, but in the open air. They built a monument from stone and crystal scavenged from the ruins of the capital. It was simple but elegant, art born of gratitude and grief. Elias Trent's name was carved into it in both human script and Prime's flowing glyphs. Beneath it, the inscription read, "He came from the stars when no one else would. He gave his life so others could live. He is remembered." The entire surviving population attended the memorial. Tellerin addressed them with a voice that carried across the square. "We cried into the darkness," he said. "We expected fleets and armies. Instead, 5 humans answered." He gestured toward Mercer, Mara, Rhea, and Lucas. They did not come for reward. They did not come for conquest. They came because we asked. His gaze hardened slightly. Our records once labeled them monsters, products of violence and death. But we were wrong. They're not monsters. They are protectors. Many wept openly. Hours later, the Galactic Assembly finally arrived. Warships filled the sky, impressive, polished, and utterly unnecessary now. Their admiral approached Mercer, with visible irritation masked as authority. "You acted without authorization," the admiral said sharply. "This operation was reckless." Mercer met his eyes calmly. "It worked." "You were fortunate," the admiral snapped. "You had no military backing, no strategic oversight." Mercer's voice was quiet but unyielding. "We had 5 people willing to die for strangers." The admiral had no reply. In the days that followed, offers poured in. Mercer was offered rank, command, influence. He declined all of it. "There are other signals out there," he told Tellerin. "Other people who need help." Tellerin nodded slowly. "You will keep answering." "Yes," Mercer said simply. Before departing, Mara received the highest honor Prime could bestow, a crystalline emblem representing courage and sacrifice. She accepted it, then knelt before a young girl standing alone at the edge of the crowd. The child had lost everything. "This belongs to you," Mara said, placing the medal in the girl's hands. "You survived. That takes more strength than any battle." "Will you come back?" the girl asked. Mara smiled gently. "Whenever you need us." The wayward sun lifted off beneath a clear sky, repaired by grateful hands. Thousands gathered to watch it rise, waving, cheering, holding signs written in careful human letters. "Thank you." As the ship vanished into hyperspace, another distress signal appeared on the console. Another world, another cry for help. Mercer didn't hesitate. "Change course," he said. "Maximum speed." Back on Prime, Ambassador Tellerin watched the stars where the human ship had disappeared. The galaxy had feared humans for generations, misunderstood them, judged them by the dangers of their world. Tellerin knew better now. Humans were not monsters. They were the answer when everyone else turned away. And somewhere, in the endless dark between stars, another voice would soon cry out. And somewhere else, a human would answer. The galaxy did not change overnight, but it did change. In the cycles following Prime's survival, the story spread. First as rumor, then as verified record, then as legend, not of fleets or empires, but of a single civilian ship that arrived when no one else would. Across the Galactic Assembly's archives, classifications were quietly revised. Hazard ratings were reconsidered. The entry for humanity was flagged for review. Ambassador Tellerin stood before the Assembly chamber weeks later, no longer as a desperate petitioner, but as a witness. "For centuries," he said, his voice steady and clear, "we have judged civilizations by the dangers of their home worlds. We assumed that harsh origins created cruel beings." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "We were wrong." Images appeared behind him. Footage of humans fighting the swarm, shielding civilians, carrying wounded children through fire and smoke. No narration was needed. The same world that forged their strength also forged their compassion, Tellerin continued. Humans do not deny danger. They live with it. And because of that, they understand what it means to protect others. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others listened in rapt attention. "When darkness came to us," Tellerin said, "the galaxy calculated risk. Humans answered. The broadcast spread far beyond the assembly. On distant colonies, families gathered around screens. On frontier stations, workers paused mid-shift. Even on worlds that had once sealed their borders, leaders watched in silence. A new phrase began circulating through the stars. If you hear a human ship answering a distress call, you will live. Aboard the wayward sun, life returned to a strange sense of normal. Mara Cole's shoulder healed slowly, leaving behind a jagged scar she refused to erase. Rhea Lawson spoke little of Elias, but his tools remained untouched, neatly arranged where he had last left them. Lucas Hale flew longer routes now, pushing the ship harder, as if motion itself kept grief at bay. Mercer watched them quietly, bearing the weight of command the way he always had. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. One evening, as the ship drifted between jumps, Rhea finally broke the silence. "Do you think it ever gets easier?" she asked. Mercer didn't pretend to misunderstand. "No." She nodded. "Good. I was worried it should." They shared a small, sad smile. A new signal flashed across the console. Not an emergency. A message. It came from Prime. Children appeared on the screen, healthy, laughing, holding up drawings of stars, ships, and 5 very tall stick figures labeled with careful, uneven handwriting. "Come visit US someday." Mara wiped her eyes. "Guess we made an impression." Mercer allowed himself a quiet laugh. "Looks like it." The wayward sun jumped again. On a distant moon, raiders fled when they detected a single human vessel entering orbit. On another world, a collapsing colony held together just long enough for help to arrive. Help that had no insignia, no demand for loyalty, no interest in control. Only a question: where are the people who need us most? Slowly, almost reluctantly, the galaxy adjusted. Distress calls once ignored were now forwarded automatically to civilian networks, especially those marked with human signatures. Joint task forces formed, not led by humans, but inspired by them, not because humans were the strongest, but because they showed up. Back on Prime, Ambassador Tellerin stood beneath the open sky, watching stars burn softly against the darkness. His world would rebuild. It would take time. It would bear scars. But it would endure. He thought of Elias Trent, of a human who had never needed to come, never owed them anything, and still gave everything. Tellerin recorded one final message, storing it in Prime's historical archive. If you ever wonder what defines humanity, he said, it is not their weapons nor the dangers of their world. It is this. When someone cries out into void, humans do not ask if they should help. They ask how fast they can get there. Far away, between unnamed stars, the wayward sun received another signal. Faint, panicked, desperate, Mercer didn't wait for analysis. Set course, he said. The ship turned smoothly, engines flaring as it vanished into hyperspace. Somewhere a world still burned. Somewhere fear still ruled. But somewhere else, a human was coming, and that made all the difference.